Hello, everyone. This is News Now from the Belmont Journal, and we are joined once again by Lisa Gibalerio of the Wayside Youth and Family Support Network and coordinator of the Belmont Wellness Coalition. And I'm your host, Mike Crowley. So, Lisa, I hope you had a great 4th of July.
Thank you. You as well, Mike.
Thank you. Today, we're talking about navigating the world of teen dating for parents. So, Lisa, parents often have questions about dating and teens or even tweens. And a first question often is when? When is it appropriate for kids to begin to date?
It's a great place to start our conversation, Mike. And unfortunately, there's not a clear-cut answer. It really does depend on the maturity of the child in question. Some kids will feel ready and excited about entering the world of dating in middle school. Other kids may not be until college. So it really does vary. But I will say that some data I uncovered in preparing for our session today reflected that about 50% of teens expressed readiness by around age 15. So I would also say as a guidepost that kids do begin getting curious about dating at around puberty. So it's perfectly developmentally appropriate as a child enters puberty. I would say somewhere in the middle school years for them to be having crushes and to be thinking about dating.
So, Lisa, what is the best way for parents to talk with their kids about dating? Or is there a best way at all?
So there's not one perfect recommended way, Mike, to have these conversations, but there are some common threads that are recommended. And we've talked about some of these before. You've heard me say that this should not be a one-off conversation that parents have with their child at, say age 13, they have one conversation about dating. Not at all. These should be ongoing conversations, and it shouldn't be the responsibility of one caregiver either. The recommendation is that both, if it's a home with two caregivers, that parents kind of alternate having these conversations. The conversations, Mike, offer parents an opportunity to impart their values, which is very important. So, for example, if you were to say to your child, I would want you to consider proceeding slowly as you begin your first relationship, both emotionally and physically. The conversations will give a parent to say why that's important. What are the benefits to proceeding in a measured, thoughtful way? The other really great advantage to having ongoing conversations is that you become a resource for your children, and you are a much more reliable resource than the alternatives, which are, of course, their peers and the internet. So being a resource for them is just a great benefit. And if you do not know the answer to a question, that's okay. Just say, look, I'm not sure about that. I'm going to do some research. I'll circle back to you. I would also underscore the importance of that these are not lectures. These are not a series of, parents sitting the kids down to hear what mom and dad have to say on this topic. They're much more real conversations, listening to the child, give and take. And finally, Mike, I would say that some teenagers have no interest in having these conversations with their parents. They may be embarrassed, they may be uncomfortable, and they may want to shut it down. And my advice to parents is to, you can take that information in and you can proceed slowly and validate that with your children. Say, look, I know this is embarrassing. I know this can be uncomfortable. And we have to have the conversations anyway. We will proceed. Same way I taught you how to safely cross a street, or how to ride your bike, or how to start driving, I also have to be your parent and impart some guidelines on this topic as well.
So, Lisa, here's a topic that often comes up in the context of kids and dating, and that's sex. If parents discuss sex with their kids, including things such as giving and receiving consent and birth control, does this encourage kids to engage in sex?
Great question, and you're right. It does come up often. And fortunately, Mike, it has been studied. And the answer is no. There is a good amount of data that suggests that what it does is exactly what you hope it will do. It provides your children with information. And it allows for just more thoughtful and informed decision making going forward. But there is no real data to suggest that it accelerates the activity that you're speaking about and providing information about. And this goes for substances as well. Talking about alcohol and other drugs does not promote drinking or using other drugs.
Lisa, is it okay for parents to put some boundaries or limits in place around, around dating or aspects of dating when talking with their kids?
Yes, absolutely, it is okay. And they will vary from family to family. As with many of the topics we discuss, Mike, there's no one size fits all. It will vary depending on your own family, your own feelings about this. I will say that some of the more common ones are, some families have said, look, no dating in middle school. We'll let you start that in, say, 9th grade. Another common guideline or boundary is, the person you're dating cannot be at our house when the parents are not home. So no unsupervised visits. And even when the parents are home, many feel that the kid should not be hanging out in a bedroom, or at the very least, if they are, that the door needs to be wide open. So those are some of the common guidelines. And I would say, discuss these limits with your child. Talk about where they're coming from, what's behind them. And, I think if you can kind of navigate and negotiate a little bit, I think, get a little buy-in from your teen, they tend to have more respect for those limits.
People sometimes have negative dating experiences, and this extends to kids. Is this a topic that parents want to bring up with their teens?
Oh, I would hope so, Mike. The data shows that 1 out of 4 teenagers have experienced some form of negative or even abuse in dating relationships. It can take the form of verbal abuse, physical abuse, sexual and/or emotional. So I think it's really important for parents to say, look, there are good relationships, there are comfortable relationships, and there are not good relationships. And I think parents can talk about how to extricate from a relationship that isn't safe, that isn't good. And parents should know that they absolutely can intervene if their children seem to be stuck in a relationship that is unhealthy, unsafe for them. So I think what I would say is part of what you're discussing all along is what good, healthy relationships and what dating practices that are safe and comfortable look like. I think it's important for us to really impart to our kids that you want to be with someone who you do feel comfortable with, who you respect and respects you. You don't want to get lost in, I would advise parents to tell their children that you don't want to get lost in someone else's identity, in someone else's needs or desires. You want a kid to feel good about themselves, hopefully. And you want them to understand that there is going to be healthy, normal conflict. People in relationships of all ages have things to work through. There are going to be, disagreements and arguments, and that's normal and inherently a part of being in a relationship. But it can cross over into the areas we just discussed that are unhealthy and potentially unsafe. And kids need to get a sense of when if it crosses over, what that might look like. And finally, Mike, I would say that part of what we're discussing is the fact that teenage relationships are inherently learning experiences. They're not designed, to be the happily ever after relationship. There's going to be some pain, and there's going to be a lot of growth and hopefully a lot of learning. They are all about, kind of just getting to know yourself, getting to know who you want to be with, and what kind of a relationship makes you happy.
Right. Thank you, Lisa. And thank you so much for the advice, which, parents, I'm sure will appreciate. This is the Belmont Journal News Now. I'm Mike Crowley, and we will see you next time.